What's going on, everybody? We are back here live again to give you guys our finalized rookie rankings. We were able to make it through the NFL draft this weekend. It was definitely something I think we all needed. It was definitely fun to watch the new way they handled it this year. How was your guys' weekends?
Busy working, putting a new window in the duck coop.
How about you?
On that honeydew list.
I was trying to tell if that was a euphemism or not. My weekend was pretty good. Watched a lot of draft on Friday night after we logged off here. Got to have it on in the background at least. As long as I was available for conversation, it was okay if it was on.
Right.
And then a lot of draft on Saturday, and it seemed like some of the rookie drafts just took off like as the seventh round was ending.
Yeah, in the Back Row Invitational League, our draft starts at noon on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's kind of. It seems like I'm in. I think. I have to double check, but I'm in double digits right now going on. So just trying to keep up with everything has definitely been fun. It really seems like probably more late Friday night and Saturday is where we've really seen a bunch of these guys kind of go. We saw obviously a lot of the top guys go. Some of them Thursday wide receiver wise. Some of the running backs we kind of saw go as we went live Friday, but really a bulk of these guys seem to have gone late here Friday night and Saturday. So we've got our finalized ranks here. We're not going to talk about every single guy. You guys have been paying attention. You've heard us talk about some of these guys throughout these past couple of weeks. We are going to give you our full ranks, and I'm going to kind of ask you guys about some of the disparities we have in our ranks. There's a couple of us that have a few guys here and there. So let's just kick it off. Let's go with the top five for us right now. I feel like that's probably more relevant. I'll give you mine first since mine seem to be a little bit different than your guys. My top five are Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Tua, Eason, and then Love. Those are my top five at the moment. Dennis, why don't you give us who your top five are?
I have the QB1 all off season, Tua, Burrow, Herbert, Eason, and Love for me.
And then what about you, Matt?
I have Tua on top, Burrow, and then Herbert and Eason. So Dennis and I are the same there. My number five, I put Jalen Hurts.
Interesting. So Hurts is going to be the one that stands out. We'll get to him in a minute. Why do you guys have Tua at one? Is it just – I guess I could see the argument from what Miami has done, but just kind of give me your side of why Tua at one over Joe Burrow, who got drafted one, had obviously one of the most historic college seasons we've ever seen.
Well, wouldn't you rank the better quarterback higher?
That's debatable. We've seen good quarterbacks.
Well, it is debatable that you would rank the better quarterback higher. We've seen that.
No, my argument against Tua, I'm not saying he's not the better quarterback. He's definitely shown that he's, I guess, more consistent through his college career. I don't know if you could say he's better. What Joe Burrow did last year has been better than Tua has ever done, but he's been more consistent. My biggest fear with Tua is he's had way too many injuries for me to just say he's going to be okay coming into the NFL. Haven't seen it from Joe. Joe's gotten hurt. What would that have been? I think going into his junior year at Ohio State in the offseason, he got hurt. That's eventually what led to Dwayne Haskins winning that job. He was able to beat him out because
that was like 8 years ago.
Yeah, probably something like that. But Tua has been hurt every single year that he has been in. It's dead, buddy. Tua's been hurt every single year that he's been in college, and that as Nick Saban said, he's not a guy who mixes words. He came in and said that he doesn't think Tua does a good job of taking care of himself. He takes unnecessary hits and doesn't get rid of the ball when he does, and that's something that you can't just coach out of someone like that. He's so damn competitive that I don't think that's something that is going to be easily coached out of him. And I think it's fair to say these NFL players are a lot bigger, stronger, faster than the college players he's been playing. So I do worry about that with Tua. He's still my number three. You can get him at one, and I'm okay missing him, not getting him as my top quarterback. But that's my biggest fear on him. Matt, what are your thoughts on Tua?
Well, I'm like Dennis. I thought he was the best quarterback. So there are a couple. I'm trying to find the graphic now, too. There was somebody that put a graphic out. You talk about the injuries that actually showed that Joe Burrow missed more games in college than Tua did. So he's been hurt a few times. But aside from that massive hip injury, he hasn't missed a ton of time.
Yeah,
now that is a big question, obviously.
The ankle injuries, had he not gotten the tightrope surgery, which not a lot of people do, it is something that seems to be more focused on at Alabama. He would have missed more time. He's had 2 serious ankle injuries in his 2 years. He had the tightrope injury, which I think only held him out. The first year, I actually don't think he sat out, but more than 1 week. And then last year, he sat out a couple weeks because they kind of pretty much came out and said, hey, we're playing cupcakes. We're saving it for the LSU game. And so he sat out for 2 weeks. And then obviously the hip injury happened a couple weeks later.
Well, that might happen with the Dolphins, too, when they play the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't just play the Jets every week. It's not
I know,
much
but you
of
just
a
need
cupcake schedule.
You just need a couple weeks off, right? So,
Yeah.
no. So I guess for me, I thought he was a better quarterback. I think Miami taking him showed that, because the big unknown with everything, especially that happened because of the pandemic, is we didn't get to see pro days and teams didn't get to send their doctors. So some were questioning whether all the reports that have come from his camp and people that have supposedly seen him says he's fine.
Yeah.
So I felt a little bit better seeing the Dolphins take him. Honestly, well, it's comparing rotten apples. I actually think Miami's organization is better than an organization run by Mike Brown. So that's, sorry, but that's another thing. I actually like Miami's coaching situation a little bit better than Zach Taylor. So, those are factors for me. I sat here today and listened to several people talk about how much Anthony Lynn believes in Tyrod Taylor. So that gave me a moment of pause about Herbert. So when I'm putting him in, I think those 3 guys are in a tier probably way above all the other prospects because of opportunity and where they were drafted and stuff. And you could probably make a case for different players. I'm a little bit more like Dennis in that I thought Tua, when healthy, is the best quarterback. I don't think there's a huge disparity in their situations. If anything, of those 3 teams, Miami seemed the most ascendant at the end of last year. So, that's how I broke it.
And like I said, it makes sense. I could see an argument, as you just said as well, for any of those top 3 guys. I put Herbert above Tua just because I like his situation better in the long run. I think obviously having the weapons around him that he does right now, they've already kind of secured some of those guys. Mike Williams, you've got Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. They brought in – who did they bring in they got Justin Jackson, and they brought in Joshua Kelly as well in the draft.
And KJ Hill, so maybe a little more speed as a third option.
I like that landing. He's actually going to be in an article I'm working on right now.
They had nothing behind Mike Williams and Keenan Allen that made you excited. So I thought that was kind of an underrated move. They still have Hunter Henry.
Yeah, I like.
They signed Donald Parham, the tight end that we all liked from the XFL.
Yeah.
He looked like a good receiver.
I don't know so much about Donald Parham. I'm not going to get too excited about him, but some of the other weapons.
What do you want to know about Donald Parham? I can tell you about Donald Parham.
Oh, I'm sure he's good from what I saw in the XFL games. And I like the weapons that Herbert has around him. So I do agree with you. Everything we've heard is that it does seem like they're going to lean on Tyrod Taylor, at least early in the season. So you're likely – I also don't think Tua starts. I think the only one that secured a spot starting right off the bat is Joe Burrow. Tua and Herbert are likely going to have to wait for a little bit in this first year. So let's go a little bit down, since we've all kind of agreed that those are our top guys. So me and Dennis we all have Eason. So what do we think about Eason? Because I thought this was a great landing spot for him and possibly now being the guy after Phillip Rivers. And I also think that kind of speaks bad about anybody who has Jacoby Brissett shares and was hoping he was going to be the guy once Rivers leaves.
Well, I think Eason is kind of the polar opposite of Brissett. Eason's the big arm, going to push it down the field, take some more chances. Brissett's kind of like Teddy Bridgewater, but I don't think with as good of an arm. So while Brissett's he's the safe school. You put in for your Ivy Leagues, and then you put in with the
one that lets you live with your parents. And
yeah, that's the one. So I like Eason. Eason he's going to have opportunity. He needs some time, and sitting behind Phillip Rivers is going to give him at least 1, maybe 2 years. I think Jacoby Brissett kind of brings to the table some of the things that you get from Jalen Hurts in the intangible, Brissett's just a better quarterback than Hurts. So I think Brissett and Rivers can really teach Eason how to be an NFL quarterback and harness the tools he has, know when to throw it away, when to throw it out of bounds, and when to give up the play, and when to take your shot. And I think that's what really happens with Eason moving up my boards. I'm not a huge fan, but I think the opportunity moves him above, say, Love, who's likely to sit for 3 or 4 years, or anybody else on the list who honestly isn't. I almost stopped my list at 4.
Yeah. Well, this is where, the post-draft landing spot really altered some of the quarterback, because usually after those top 3 had kind of set themselves apart. And usually a lot of people, some people liked Hurts better, but a lot of people had Jordan Love there as number 4. And he was the 4th quarterback taken, but where he goes, in terms of the game that we play, fantasy and dynasty, that's a tough waiting game. You could have him on your bench for 1 year. You could have him on the bench for 2 years. You could have him on your bench for 3 years. Eason goes to a place where we like the offense. They have a quarterback-friendly head coach in Frank Reich. Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett are on 1-year contracts, which we all talked about when Rivers signed that 1-year deal. It was kind of like, it seemed like a sign that he wants to give it one more go, see if he can make a run with the Colts, and then, see what happens, see if it's a good fit, and I think that's, Eason was right in there in that midst of that second kind of tier group of quarterbacks, and he ends up going to the best location. I think that makes him easily the top of that tier behind the top 3.
I agree.
I agree. Like I said, for me, you're likely looking at it, as we just talked about, 1 year, maybe, and then you've got him back out there. Maybe Brissett goes out there if they really feel Eason's not ready, but I think after this year, Eason's going to be the guy on a team that we've seen has continued to build a really good team around him as well. That offensive line's one of the top offensive lines, added one of the best running backs in the draft this year for him as well. And then he's got a ton of wide receiver weapons. So it's going to be fun to see Eason in that offense next year. Jordan Love, I mean, there's not much to say about him, I think. I liked Love coming in. I wasn't as high on him as others. He was still my 4 in the class. But going to Green Bay, I mean, in a super flex draft even, I'm taking him over, or really probably even behind a guy like Cole McDonald, who I have ranked just behind him because I think McDonald has a better chance sooner. But Love, I imagine, is sitting for at least 4 years. I believe Rodgers' contract is up in 2022, so that may be the first time. 2023. So that may be the first time that we see Jordan Love. So you're going to be holding on to.
To be fair, Rodgers' contract becomes non-guaranteed following this year. So that's the real question. I mean, I don't think any of us are like, oh, Green Bay is just going to be in a hurry to put the guy out the door.
But Favre either, and they did it. So maybe, but I doubt it. Is there anybody else on? I'm going to give you my guy, and if there's anybody else you guys want to talk about on this list before we move on to the running backs, because as you guys mentioned, there's really not a lot of. I mean, you got the Fromm's, Hurts. These guys. I mean, Hurts.
Well, Fromm went to a horrible spot too because Josh Allen.
Maybe
was only taken a couple of years ago. Fromm's got to be. They must have looked at him and said, "Hey, career backup. He can miss a receiver just as well as the guy we got in the starting lineup. We take it."
That's true.
Well, I think one landing spot that I liked from a developmental perspective was Anthony Gordon going to Seattle.
Okay.
So his game is a little different than Russell Wilson's, but I think he also is a pretty good quarterback. And if he sits behind Wilson, he could be a Jimmy Garoppolo type where he sits for 3 or 4 years in preseason and the occasional mop up. He looks good. And then 3 years from now, somebody acquires him and gives him an opportunity to start.
So that's kind of why I put Hurts and then McDonald over Love. Not because I think they're necessarily better players, but if you're looking at the place where they got set, they look to be a number 2 quarterback with relatively little competition for that position behind veterans who have a checkered injury history. I mean, there's been a lot of talk that they took Hurts because they wanted to have a hedge against Carson Wentz, who we've seen miss time a few times. I also think there's potential Hurts ends up playing a little bit of Taysom Hill ball and goes out there on packages, may have some standalone value. And McDonald, let's not forget, Ryan Tannehill blew his knee out like 3 years in a row.
Well, on Hurts, you are exactly correct on that. I listened to Doug Peterson give an interview today where they already have packages for him in the offense. Now, I heard the Taysom Hill comp, and I don't necessarily see that. He's not as explosive as Taysom Hill. He's as explosive as your other guy there, the Tim Tebow there.
Not as accurate either.
He's a little bit more accurate than.
No, he is more accurate.
But I don't think he's going to come in and be quite as used the way that the Saints use Taysom Hill. But they've already said that they've got packages for him, and I agree with you. I think they wanted to bring in a guy who's somewhat mobile, can kind of play like Carson Wentz. He's not going to be able to throw the ball as accurate or with the cannon that Carson Wentz has, but he can somewhat play in that offensive scheme. So it's just for backup.
I have doubts that Hurts can beat out Nate Sudfeld.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. I mean, it took him in the second round. I think that as much as
just because they take you there. I don't think Hurts can process the offense quick enough. Well, they're gonna give him a package of they're gonna give him a package of plays that involve him taking the snap and running.
The last two guys, you mentioned one of them, Matt, and there's another guy that I want to talk about. I think that might actually make you happy with the route I'm going to go with this. Cole McDonald, do you agree? Yeah, Stanley. Yep, I'm glad that you picked up on that.
I was tempted to put him over Love too, but I thought they would just be throwing shade.
I liked it because we don't know. I think, what did Tannehill only sign like a couple-year deal as well too, right? So it might be something where he could be the starter if he really starts to progress in that offense. We've seen that Vrabel and those guys aren't always trying to go out and get the flashiest quarterback. They want a guy that can run their system. I think McDonald can do that. He clearly comes in with a much better arm than Tannehill as well. Maybe not as explosive of a runner, but he can run the ball as well. So I like McDonald there. Could be someone they watch out for in a couple of years. But Stanley was my other guy. I do think that he could come in, and we know Kirk Cousins. Matt over here famously.
Well, he did re-up like a couple more years, right? So, I mean, Cousins, I think has 3 years now again, but they have to be looking a little bit to the future. I thought that was an interesting pick. All those guys may have a quicker path to playing, unfortunately, than Love, who's a guy whose talent that we like.
No, I know. That's the crazy part about it. So those are the guys. If I'm looking in a rookie draft, though, I feel like the top three guys are the for sure bets. I would grab Eason late if you can. Outside of that, I'm really not touching anybody right now. I think any of these other guys you might be able to get later or off the waiver wire in your rookie leagues or in your dynasty leagues. Running back, this is going to be interesting. We all have a different one. Now, I know Dennis and mine, Matt, I don't think we ever really got yours early on in the process. Me and Dennis definitely stuck with our one still here. So I'll let Matt, you go first. Give us your one. We'll just kind of go around the corner here.
I went with Taylor. I've heard a lot of strong arguments. He wouldn't probably have been my favorite running back when we went into the draft. Not that he would have. There was a huge separation for me between some of those guys, but I liked his situation. I've heard a lot of talk about the Colts were actually a sneaky, powerful running team. I don't think, maybe Dennis is, but I don't know how many of us are super Marlon Mack fans. So I don't see him as a true impediment to touches. So to me, that was where I went. I like the Colts offense. I think they're looking at the fact that they were looking to be contenders going into last year before the quarterback situation kind of derailed the start of their season. They had too many injuries. If you look at what they did in the draft, trying to load up on skill position players to really make that offense more dynamic. They had done a good job in previous years of kind of building out the line and trying to do some of those things. And I think they're in a very winnable division. So, if you can get a lead, you can run it down people's throats. I think Frank Reich would love that.
Yeah, I definitely love Jonathan Taylor to the Colts. I think the reason he stays lower for me is that they're going to use Nyheim Hines to catch the ball. They're going to spell him with Marlon Mack this year because that's just what coaches do, and it's frustrating. I do think that Taylor's going to have a good career, but he's going to be a Nick Chubb type, and that's a good thing. You definitely, there's a spot for him high in your ranks for somebody like that. But I think that he's just gonna sort of he's gonna have a little bit lower cap, a little lower ceiling than some of the other guys. I still have J.K. Dobbins as my number one. And part of it was I had to take a look at I have to make sure I'm not ranking these guys based on what are they going to do this year. So J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore, running that offense that they run, is going to have monster holes, and you can complain all you want. Oh, well, anybody could run through those holes. Well, that's true enough. But he's the one that's going to have those holes. He's the one that's going to be playing with Lamar Jackson. He's the one that's going to catch those swing passes. And I think that J.K. Dobbins is just he's going to feast. He's going to push Mark Ingram to the side. Ingram is still going to be a valuable piece. I think this year Dobbins really hurts Gus Edwards because when they get up, I feel like they're going to want to give Dobbins a little bit of extra work. And that's where Gus Edwards gained 800 yards last year. Edwards had a really good season. Justice Hill is he's getting pushed down to that fourth running back there. And as much as Baltimore runs the ball, there just isn't a lot of meat on the bone for the fourth running back. So I still have Dobbins at one. I like what he brings to that offense and how he fits there. Him and Edwards-Helaire both landed in really good fits for what they do.
Yeah, so my one, I still kept DeAndre Swift. I was not as high on this pick until we actually had Kane on here Friday, and he kind of talked me into keeping Swift at one. Coming in, he was the best back in my opinion. He's by far one of the best receiving backs in this class. I do think that gets overlooked a little bit. He's extremely elusive, and I have no doubt whatsoever that he's going to be able to beat out Kerryon and get a majority of the touches. Kerryon is more of a power back. DeAndre Swift can do it all, so I like Swift going in there with Darrell Bevel on that offense. He's going to be a guy that thinks going to be out there more often than Kerryon. I do think Kerryon is now not necessarily get relegated to a bench role. I could still see it being split 60-40, but with explosive as Swift is, I'm still keeping him up there because I don't think they renew Kerryon. They let him go once his time's up, and it's going to be all DeAndre Swift all the time. So I've got Swift there. You guys have already touched on my next two, Dobbins, Taylor. It is razor thin for me on all these guys. You could go any which way. There's one draft I went Dobbins at one. Another one I took Taylor. I took Swift in one as well. There's no wrong way, I think, to draft those guys. The one other thing I'll say about Dobbins is, as a Buckeyes fan, I've watched him play every Saturday now for the past 3 years, and he's played in the same kind of RPO offense all 3 years, whether it was with Urban Meyer or then the last year's with Ryan Day here recently. That's exactly what Baltimore does, and as much as I love Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson is a 10 times better runner than Justin Fields and 10 times more dangerous, and we saw the holes that was able to create for him in college. I imagine the same thing is going to be able to happen for him in the NFL, so I think Dobbins is going to be a stud in the NFL. If it's not this year, if they decide to let Mark Ingram kind of run one more time here as his contract runs out, Dobbins is going to be a stud hitting the ground in 2021. So regardless of where you take him, I still think he's going to get run this year. Wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't take over till later. The one difference between us, Dennis, you just mentioned him. You had CEH up here. I have him down at 6, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6. I have Keyshawn Vaughn ahead of him. I like Keyshawn Vaughn a lot. I think him going to Tampa Bay, I think he's getting undersold a little bit in what he can do in the receiving game. He wasn't asked to do that as much as Vanderbilt, but he can do it. I think
he's certainly better than Ronald Jones, that's for sure.
And not only is he better than Ronald Jones at catching the ball, he's better than Ronald Jones at running the ball. I think he's going to be the guy going into an offense that we've seen Brady loves to check down to the running back when he doesn't have anybody else. I think Vaughn is going into a sneaky good situation. What worries me about Clyde's Edwards-Helaire, you guys can rebuttal this because you both have him much higher than I do, is I just don't trust Andy Reid to give him the ball 100% of the time. I think he's going to have multiple guys competing with him. And my fear of how bad he is as a pass blocker is going to leave him off the field in crucial situations, especially if they get into a hurry-up offense, which we see them do quite often. It's going to leave him on the sidelines and leave whether it's Damian Williams, Darwin Thompson, Darrell Williams, whoever it is out there more often than him. So CEH definitely a stud, great landing spot. Until he improves on his pass blocking, though, I am a little bit worried about it. Why are you guys so sold on CEH as you have – Dennis, you have him at 2, and Matt, you have him at 3.
Before we do that, did it physically hurt you to jump off the Ronald Jones bandwagon?
Oh, I'm still on the Ronald Jones bandwagon. Whenever he goes to his new team, he's going to be a top 12 running back. He's just not going to happen in Tampa. I've resided myself to that.
So my question for Matt was this. So you're going to sit here and tell me all about how, you kept DeAndre Swift as your number 1. He's still your number 1 back. You're pumping DeAndre Swift. And then I just sit here and watch you draft J.K. Dobbins over DeAndre Swift.
That's because I knew I could get DeAndre Swift too. But what you're not. So
I feel like you got a shovel and you're in the barn with the bulls and you're shoveling.
You're leaving out one very convenient fact though. I had the 1-1 and the 1-2. And so I took DeAndre Swift second, didn't I?
No, this is in the Fantasy Life Writers League. You just took J.K. Dobbins.
Gone, isn't he?
No,
he hasn't gone.
Is he not?
No, only Edwards, Hilaire, and Taylor have gone.
I thought Swift was gone. I don't even have Swift in my queue, so I either missed him or I thought he got drafted. So I don't really care. I still want Dobbins. I'm fine with it.
So Dobbins is your 1, your RB1.
No,
that's what I see. That's what I see with my eyes.
This isn't a rookie draft. This is a all-inclusive draft here. And I wanted Dobbins. I'll go get
Dynasty rookies and Dynasty leagues. Dynasty is Dynasty.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, if you have the 1 and 2 and you're taking the 2 guys, why wouldn't you symbolically take your number 1 at number 1?
Because I wanted Dobbins to know that I took him 1. When he comes on the
because
podcast,
Dobbins is his 1. We've
I
seen Matt with Ronald Jones. It takes him a long time to come to terms with reality.
No, it's my
It takes him time to come to terms with reality.
I draft with my heart, not my head. I've been very honest about that for a very long time. It's cost me quite a few times, but it is what it is.
And hey, Matt, I would like to apologize for convincing you to trade me a pick in the Back Row Invitational League and then taking your guy Hodgins with that pick.
Right. I'm all right. I've got him in enough leagues right now. It's okay to not have him in 1. I'm okay with it.
Well, I feel like that was why you wouldn't trade with me in the other in the Roundtable League when I offered you.
No, I wanted because you actually got Pittman. Who did I take? No, I wanted T. Higgins. I needed another good wide receiver.
Yeah, that's who I was targeting there.
No, I wouldn't. In all honesty, I would have done the trade even if you told me you were coming up to get Hodgins because I wanted the 2nd round pick. Like I don't really like. I've got Hodgins in enough leagues.
Right.
And if you've seen my wide receivers in that league, I don't need him at all. So I'm good with it. But let's talk about CEH now. Enough talk about our fantasy teams. You guys have him high. You heard what my opinion of him is. Why do you guys have him up there at 2 and 3?
Well, I think he went to a situation where he is going to be the guy. He's clearly more talented than Damian Williams. I do expect them to keep Damian Williams unless, like Carlos Hyde last year, somebody comes knocking on the door and says, hey, we're going to give you a premium pick, a 3rd or 4th rounder. But Williams just isn't as good. Darrell Williams isn't as good, and Darwin Williams isn't as good. No, I know his name isn't Williams.
Thompson. It's all right.
So
I think they're all Williams. They're all Williams to Andy. He's like, hey, Williams with a D, get out there.
So Edwards-Helaire is gonna have to improve his pass blocking. That's clear. But I also think that one of the things that we often forget about in pass blocking or in pass plays is that what percentage of those plays is the back actually staying in the block versus going out? Over half of those plays, the back is going out in a pattern. So the pass blocking is important. Mm-hmm. But I think Edwards-Helaire is going to dominate the snaps. They wanted him there. They see him, Andy Reid, Brett Veach, Patrick Mahomes, all see him. They're like, he's a better Brian Westbrook. That's what I keep hearing people say. I don't know. They love him. I think that he's going to get the opportunity and he's got the ability.
Yeah. And that to me, it was the landing spot. I think, I like Damian Williams fine. He seems to have real trouble staying on the field and staying in the rotation. And I think that's the reason why we've seen flashes when he was at Miami and flashes a couple of years. It almost feels like what we used to joke about with Derrick Henry for a couple of years. Damian Williams showed up 2 years in a row for like the last game of the regular season of the playoffs, and now he vaults up everybody's list. They're in a high volume offense. I think we've seen before with rookies that, people said to have caution. I'm pretty sure that's the way it was with Kareem Hunt too. When he started, he'll work in, he's really talented, but he's going to be part of a committee. And sooner or later he takes over and is the guy. And I don't think there's anyone on that roster that's a long-term or even possibly a 2020 major impediment to him getting meaningful minutes if he can stay healthy. And he is what we think he is. He's in a great spot, to play with Patrick Mahomes in that offense.
All right, so the last guy that we all seem to have here in our top five, outside of me, I guess, is Akers. Are you guys liking the position of him landing with the Rams? What are your guys' thoughts on him before we kind of finish out our ranks here, and we'll touch on some of the lower end guys?
I like Akers to the Rams. I agree with the issue that he went from playing with a bad O-line in college to he's going to have a bad O-line. I've heard a couple, we had Kane on last week and he talked about how Akers didn't fit what they do in that offenses very well. I've also heard a couple people talking about how he does fit that offense well. And so I think the jury is going to be out. I do think he's a much more talented back than Darrell Henderson. And okay. I feel like that's going to come to the forefront. He's a better all-around back than Henderson, and I think he's going to be able to do some of the things that Henderson can't. So I'm good with Akers as my fifth running back.
Yeah, I like the offense, the opportunity. I'm pulling it up here. I mean, we saw last year, behind a sometimes suspect offensive line that at times, Malcolm Brown and even Todd Gurley, who seemed to be injured, managed to do there. It's going to be a pretty open competition. Nobody that he's going in with has a solid hold on that running back position. And if the Rams can get their mojo back and pick up from some of the struggles they had last year, I think that can be a great opportunity.
All right, so what I want to do is kind of just have us give the rest of our running back ranks, and then if you guys want, we can touch on a couple guys here and there as we go through them. So for me, after CEH and Akers, I've got DJ Dallas, who I think lands in a great spot there in Seattle. I think that's if you own Rashad Penny, you need to be freaking out. I think Chris Carson's going to be back. DJ Dallas, I think, steps into that role. Darrington Evans, I think, lands in another also really interesting spot with Tennessee. Could be the guy if they decide to let Derrick Henry go. Still hasn't signed a long-term deal. He's a guy who can kind of do it all. Antonio Gibson, I know Matt's got an issue with. I'm sure he'll talk about
I need Antonio Gibson / Redskins corner in a minute.
Yeah. So I like it though. Interesting him landing there. They've come out and said that he's going to be a running back for them. He can play wide receiver going into a loaded running backfield. So that'll be an interesting spot. I'm going to cut mine here at A.J. Dillon, and then we'll talk about the rest of them here in a minute. I'll let you guys kind of get down to where I'm at as well. A.J. Dillon's a really interesting spot for me. I have him higher than both of you guys. I like it in the fact that Aaron Jones is out of his contract after this year. We have not heard any news about them possibly wanting to resign him. I think as much as I'm not a fan of Dillon, he is better than Jamal Williams. So I think there's a realistic shot that A.J. Dillon could be the lead back for the Green Bay Packers come 2021. So that's why I have him as high as I do. Dennis, give us your whatever. I think I just gave my next five. Give us your next five. Anything you want to mention on them really quick.
Nothing's going to make Aaron Rodgers retire quicker than A.J. Dillon being his starting running back.
Maybe that's why.
You think he was pissed this weekend? Just give him couple seasons.
Did you guys hear what they said? Blanking on his name right now, but the Green Bay coach, apparently, LaFleur, apparently said this draft was designed around the philosophy that he wants to maintain for the Green Bay Packers, which is strong defense and a focus on the running game. His preference would be to throw the ball 20 times or less per game. So people are like, if you are just hoping to grind out 17, 14 games, cut Aaron Rodgers loose, because this makes no sense. But that would explain why you just said F it to the wide receiver position. You're like Alan Lazard, the corpse formerly, they signed somebody who was injured.
Devin Funchess.
Yeah. The corpse formerly known as Devin Funchess, ESB. You guys come on down, because we're not going to throw the ball anyway.
Yeah. All right, so Dennis, give us your guys real quick, and then we'll knock on. Like I said, I know Matt really wants to get to his Antonio Gibson rant here, so give us your 5, and then we'll get to Matt.
So I have Vaughn and Moss at 6 and 7, basically tied, and then LaMichael Pirine, Darrington Evans, and Antonio Gibson. So my guy that I really like is LaMichael Pirine. He went to New York. He's an really good all around back, and I don't think Le'Veon Bell is there after this year. So in 2021, LaMichael Pirine could be the starting running back for the new head coach of the New York Jets. I love the opportunity he's getting there.
My love of Bell will not allow me to acknowledge that last comment.
Yeah.
I had 6 to 10. I had Swift, Moss, Antonio Gibson, which I protest, Dallas, and McFarland. So originally, when we were ranking them, after I watched draft coverage and they talked about the Gibson pick at 302 as a slot wide receiver, I thought that made a lot of sense for Washington, who has almost a sadder professional wide receiver depth chart than the New York Jets. And then I saw you put him in the running back rankings for this, and I specifically moved him in mind to the wide receiver rankings until you said you weren't going to allow it. So I still fundamentally do not understand how Washington has decided to draft this guy to be another running back so that they have like 85 running backs, unless they've decided that A, the wishbone is coming back in fashion, or B, like the rest of us, Ron Rivera looked at tape on Dwayne Haskins and decided that investing in professional receivers would do them no good.
Maybe. I mean, I do think it could speak more to I know that it's obviously a different coach and everything. They've relied heavily on Chris Thompson over the past couple of years. We don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Love. I mean, he's a guy I know Dennis is big on, but he suffered the knee injury. We haven't really heard much about him coming back. Darius Geis has not been able to stay on the field for more than 2 games at a time. Adrian Peterson is, I swear, about to turn to dust on the NFL football field. I mean, they have no one, and Antonio Gibson does give them a different skill set and a lot of explosion at that position. So to me, it makes a little bit of sense in bringing him in to be the running back.
That's fine, but if I can channel my inner Mel Kiper Jr., if
Go
you're
ahead.
in a loaded wide receiver draft and you have fuck all at receiver and you decide to draft another running back, that's why you're picking in the top of the draft every year.
Well,
So
they got Scary Terry. They don't need anybody else. They got Kelvin Harmon. Who else?
Even Terry McLaurin's like, guys,
he'll be all right.
I can't have 95 defensive backs on me.
I think that Gibson is going to be a Cordero Patterson type of weapon. The occasional wide receiver lineup, the occasional lineup in the backfield. I don't think they're drafting somebody that had less than 100 carries in 4 years of college, including 2 at junior college, where an athlete like this should be able to dominate. And they're going to say, hey, he's going to be our starting running back. Antonio Gibson.
You never know with Washington, I guess.
Antonio Gibson at the running back. If he's listed as a running back, it's fool's gold.
All right, so I'm going to give the rest of mine really quick. And they're not really a lot of guys that I want to touch on. McFarland, I guess, interesting landing spot. I would honestly be a little bit worried about if you're a James Conner owner, that could be an interesting thing for him. Eno Benjamin is actually really interested me. We know Kenyon Drake is And I don't think he signed a long-term contract yet, but they
for
are
1
He
year.
just signed the franchise tender. I
So
believe.
we don't know if he's going to come back. I've talked about it before. Eno Benjamin had a phenomenal year 2 years ago in college, just seemed to struggle last year. Him going in the 7th round could be a late steal in your rookie drafts. Who could be? He has the opportunity to do something for Arizona. I'm not as sold on Chase Edmonds. He's another guy who has the injury issues, and so does Kenyon Drake. So he's a guy that I'm interested in. I have P. Ryan here. I kind of agree with everything Dennis said. He's a guy you might be able to get even earlier than that. Moss really kind of fell for me. I was trying to move him higher, and I just couldn't. I maybe it's because I'm so big on Singletary. I know Moss will probably come in and get some goal line work, but as this guy right here says all the time, their best goal line back is Josh Allen, and he runs it in all the time. So I honestly don't even know if Zach Moss is going to get a lot of goal line work. So he's dropped really far for me. I don't know how to say this guy's name.
Calais.
Is it Calais?
It's got to be.
Seeing him go to Tampa Bay. He played at, I believe it was at Louisiana Tech, if I'm remembering correctly right now. Really good, explosive guy, really good receiver out of the backfield. So I could see him possibly coming in here with Keyshawn Vaughn if they try and push Ronald Jones out. And then for me last, Joshua Kelly and Huntley. I honestly don't think they have any fantasy value whatsoever, but they got drafted. So
I'm afraid that Kelly will have value. I'm hoping you're right because I love Justin Jackson.
Well, yeah, that would be the key. But
I think that if Justin Jackson doesn't pop this year, that Joshua Kelly is the guy next year in that offense with Eckler. And I don't know who Huntley is.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't either. I saw he got drafted, so that's why I put him at the bottom of my ranking. So go ahead, Dennis. Give us the rest of yours.
So I'm finishing out with DJ Dallas. I like the concept of him going to Seattle.
They're like, he's about the bottom. Well, sorry about that.
But I think that again, it's a very crowded. I don't think they're giving up on Rashad Penny yet, but they might. I know Pete loves him some Chris Carson. Then I followed up with Joshua Kelly, Anthony McFarland, Eno Benjamin, and then finished out with Dylan, Calais, and Huntley. I think I like Benjamin is very similar to P. Ryan in that he's the long play. He's a guy you're going to draft him in the 4th round, 5th round. You're going to put him on your taxi squad. And next year, that's when going into year 2, when the starter is gone, if Drake leaves, if Bell leaves, that's where these guys are coming on. I'm not sold on McFarland as a replacement for Connor or a replacement for Samuels. Or a
replacement for Snell,
just because his game is so different. He's a piece. I think if you take Connor, Snell, Samuels, and McFarland, and you smash them all together, you've got one good running back.
Yeah, and obviously, that idea that any of those Pittsburgh backs could just step right in and do wonders kind of floated down fantasy river. Last year, when Connor was in, he was okay, but when it was the other Chuckles, it was not. So I have some reservations too. I kind of just filled out the rest too. I had Evans, then Dylan. I guess I'm a little less sold on what potentially his role or even what Green Bay is doing than you. Benjamin, I thought was an interesting stash, and P. Ryan for the same reasons. Kind of the guys that could have a real opportunity in another year. If things break right. Then I had Kelly. He scares me. I may start at the end of drafts, handcuffing him places where I have Jackson. And then I had Huntley and Clace. One that wasn't on there that I've been following that's interesting to me, just because I like Denver, is they're huge on signing undrafted free agents. They've had some of their best finds. Chris Harris Jr. was an undrafted free agent. Philip Lindsay, an undrafted free agent. Shaq Barrett was our undrafted free agent. You've seen some of these guys. They paid a pretty high guarantee to Levante Bellamy, a running back from Western Michigan, as one of their undrafted free agents. So I think that's, if you're looking for a deep stash to be watching, it was around this time a couple of years ago that I was watching when we signed Lindsay to see what was going to happen. So kind of I thought it was an interesting signing. Royce Freeman's a guy that you figure they may try to move to someone who's feeling desperate.
Yeah. To the Washington Redskins.
Probably. Hey, you can never have enough. Never enough. Never.
On the wide receivers here, mine changed a little bit, and obviously, if you guys were with us Friday, if you didn't get to watch us live, all 3 hours got uploaded Friday afternoon. Lamb moved down for me a little bit because of the landing spot, but my top 5 ended up Judy just because I do think he's such a good wide receiver, and I thought landed in the perfect landing spot there with Denver. Lamb then falls to second for me. I like the spot. I could see him overtaking Gallup. I am just a little bit worried. There's so many mouths to feed in that offense. They've been so reliant on Zeke for so much in that. Now, I do think it's good for them because Amari Cooper sucks. So now you have like Lamb and Gallup who are actually good wide receivers. So Dak might actually be able to throw somebody who can catch the ball. So I do like that. Jalen Reagor stays at 3 for me. Or technically he was 2, so he falls to 1 spot as well. Love the landing spot with Philadelphia. They've built a serious all-star track team there with their wide receiver group, and I think Reagor is by far the best wide receiver there. Gives Wentz a true deep down the field threat, but a guy who can also catch the ball near the line of scrimmage and do a whole lot with it afterwards. So I loved Reagor. Higgins to Cincinnati, love that as well. I think he's a younger version, but more explosive version of AJ Green. To pair him with a guy like Joe Burrow, I think Higgins is going to be a steal for a lot of people in their rookie drafts. And then last, Ayuk rose up my board. He was 11 for me last week when me and Dennis did this. I have him now at 5. The fact that I believe, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, San Francisco traded back up to get him. Did they not?
Yes, they did. They jumped from 31 to 26.
So the fact that they
25.
traded up to get him and then him going into that offense where I think Debo is their number 1 right now. And as much as I love Debo, he's not a number 1 wide receiver. He is a guy that needs to be in the slot, is an explosive playmaker. I love what they do with him in the run game. And Ayuk can do that, and he's bigger and faster and stronger. And that's what I like about him. He's a guy who we saw at Arizona State, could do all kinds of things in special teams. I think him going there and the fact that Kyle Shanahan wanted him is going to be big for Ayuk. I think he has a chance to be a really good wide receiver going into a great offensive situation. So that is why he shot up my board. Dennis, who are your top 5?
Mine are all the same, except I have Pittman at 5 instead of Ayuk. They're not the same. Lamb is my 1. I think he's still the best receiver. In a dynasty perspective, you take the best guy. He's going to give you some production this year, but he's the best. I have Judy at 2, Reagor at 3, Higgins at 4, and then Pittman at 5. I love Reagor getting opportunity, but at any time, you just don't know who's going to pop off. If who's the old dude there? Dang it.
Which team?
Played for the Bears, for the Eagle. Alshon
Jeffrey.
Yeah. If he could come back at any time and have a healthy season. Greg Ward showed
You mean
something.
his first healthy season?
Yeah. Could happen. So he's going to get opportunity. Let's see how he produces with it. T. Higgins, I love his opportunity. He might be stifled this year with AJ Green, Tyler Boyd. I think he's going to really impact Tate and Ross if he performs well. But I like Pittman at 5. He has an opportunity to go into Indianapolis where they don't have a guy like him that's been able to stay on the field. Funchess couldn't stay on the field. He was a little bit bigger, a little bit slower version of Higgins. Darius Fountain hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's a bigger wide receiver. So Pittman going into Indianapolis, teaming up with T.Y. Hilton, Jack Doyle at the tight end, and then Mack and Taylor in the backfield. Now all of a sudden that great offensive line, and they've got another field general in Phillip Rivers. I could see Pittman being the offensive rookie of the year.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. Give us your top 5.
So I think we all have the same top 3, just maybe in different orders. So I had Judy 1. I moved Reagor up to 2 and Lamb at 3. Obviously, you know how much I love CeeDee Lamb. It's just competition. Also, part of me doesn't trust Dallas. Even though I have so many Dallas receivers now and so many teams. Then I went with Jefferson. I thought the opportunity there in Minneapolis was pretty good. I've seen some projections that they think he'll catch more passes than Diggs did last year. So I liked that landing spot. I liked the player. And then I had Pittman for all the same reasons that kind of Dennis touched on. I thought that was a great landing spot. I am pretty high on that offense. I think they're really gunning to make the run that we all thought they might make last year.
All right, before we continue talking about the wide receivers, Ben has a question here. I was trying to get it to pop up. So if it does pop up, we'll jump on that. It's about the running backs. I'll continue my wide receivers really quick. So my next 5 are Justin Jefferson, Michael Pittman, Denzel Mims, Chase Claypool, and then I have Henry Ruggs coming in there. Obviously, I like all the landing spots for those guys outside of Ruggs. My fear with Ruggs is I kind of feel like they went the Arizona Cardinals route that the Cardinals went a couple years ago, where they just drafted a crap ton of wide receivers in hopes that one of these guys works out. I think Ruggs is going to make plays in Oakland. I don't think it's going to be consistent. I actually like Brian Edwards there a whole lot more than I do Ruggs. So I'm not as big on Ruggs as other people, but I loved all the other landing spots. Claypool's interesting to me. I wasn't as high on him as others, but seeing the Steelers kind of take him as early as they did, and they do have the reputation for kind of developing wide receivers. So he's not a guy that I'm going to probably take, but go ahead.
Did you hear the talk that they're looking at converting him to tight end?
I mean, there's a lot of talk about. Kane brought that up on Friday's episode that he's a tight end. So I'm surprised.
It's not a terrible idea. However, if you're thinking about a receiver, we saw Darren Waller. That was kind of the thing. We're going to convert him onto a tight end. It took quite a few years after that process started for you to get the Darren Waller that everyone always hoped you'd see.
Yeah,
makes me a little nervous.
Well, the issue with Waller, though, is he had a lot more off-the-field stuff. Like, who was it? Funchess came right out of college as a tight end, converted right to wide receiver, and was productive. I think that Claypool could perform like Funchess. I don't think he's going to have necessarily he's not somebody I'm looking to acquire. He's a guy that if he goes off and goes crazy, I'm going to be okay being wrong about.
Yeah. All right. Now, before we get to yours, Dennis, so Ben's question was, with this year RBs being drafted, are we seeing the NFL going towards a running back by committee and no true 3-down back? Should I draft these RBs before these stack wide receivers? For me, no. I would still go running back. I don't think – I know some of them have landed in bad landing spots. For me, probably Swift is the worst one, and I still think he's going to be the best. Jonathan Taylor – I mean, Ben, because I know you've been listening for a while. I am not a fan of Marlon Mack, so I have no doubt Marlon Mack is going to get maybe 10% of the carries. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor. I could see him losing out some receiving work to Nyheim Hines, but Jonathan Taylor is such a good runner. He's the best pure runner in this class and so explosive. The receiving part's not going to matter. He's going to put up points, just like as Dennis kind of compared him to Nick Chubb. We've seen Nick Chubb put up a ton of points in fantasy and not do much in the receiving game. I agree that's where Taylor's going to go. Difference is Taylor has probably a 10 times better offensive line than Cleveland does. So Taylor, I think, is still going to be a stud. What do you guys think about the question here Ben asked?
Well, I think some of it comes down to position scarcity and how your team is built as well. So for me, I'm trying to get an early pick to grab a running back and then a later first to grab a wide receiver. It's just, this is a draft where if I can get 2 firsts, I'm perfectly happy taking guys. But if I'm in the top half and it's if I'm in the top half and not taking a quarterback, I'm grabbing my top rated running back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a position that burns brighter, faster, and burns out faster. And that's the real thing. You get a great quality wide receiver, you might have them penciled into your starting lineup for 5, 6, 7 years. Running backs don't always have that kind of a shelf life, but that's why you got to go get them early, because you're always, it seems like, it seems like a lot of people that play Dynasty for a long time always say, I'm set at wide receiver and my running back situation. It just seems to be the nature of the position.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say as well on that kind of off of what Matt just said there is I think you draft running backs early, you trade for wide receivers late. Like there's going to be guys like I just mentioned Brian Edwards, who I think could be the better Las Vegas wide receiver. we may not even see him do much this year, but he's such a stud, in my opinion. You can probably, after he has a bad rookie season, get him for like a second-round pick. You can probably get him. I've seen him going in some of the drafts that I've been in today, going in the third round of some drafts. And I would rather take a Jonathan Taylor early and then get those guys like Dennis. Me and Dennis in a bunch of drafts, we just saw guys like T. Higgins, Michael Pittman going in the second round. If I can get Jonathan Taylor and then a T. Higgins or Michael Pittman, I'm perfectly fine with that compared to a CeeDee Lamb and then a Zach Moss or A.J. Dillon in the second round. So it's always, I would say, to be honest, it's definitely class dependent, because next year I do think you're going to see a limited amount of running backs again and a ton of wide receivers. So you're going to see people lean more on the running backs early and then grab wide receivers late because of how many wide receivers. So if we see a class where we have 8 or 9 running backs coming out that all seem to be good, maybe you go wide receiver heavy then. But for me, it's always going to be running back early unless you're just completely stacked at running back, and then maybe grab a wide receiver. But I don't think – there's just some guys that even if they look like they're going into running back by committees, for me, they're still going to be the leaders by like a 60 to maybe even 70-30 split. That's well worth keeping them, in my opinion.
But that's just the modern NFL right now.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from three guys, Saquon Barkley, McCaffrey's pretty much got all the touches, and Ezekiel Elliott. Beyond that, I think you're hard-pressed. Derrick Henry, although he seeds receiving work. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just pretty much. He
catches like 2 passes a game for 84 yards, and everybody talks about how he's a receiving back. Just saying.
Look, if you get 2 for 84 yards and a touchdown, that is being.
He got that against Cleveland Browns in week 1 last year. So just throwing that out there. Just throwing it out there. But anyway.
Friendly defense right there.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, Dennis, Dennis, give us your next 5.
Well, my next 5 are going to close some of the inconsistency you had when you gave yours. Okay. So you have Ruggs ranked at 10, and then you talked about how you felt Edwards was going to be the better receiver, whom you have ranked at 15.
Yes.
So again, this is another Dobbins Swift situation we got going here. Would you like to redo your rankings real quick before we move on?
No, I'm good. I'm good where he's at. I'm good with him.
So, all right. So at 6, I've got Justin Jefferson, followed by Denzel Mims, Brandon Ayuk, Henry Ruggs, and then Bryan Edwards. Jefferson, I like. He's good receiver, very polished, but I think he's going to be a slot guy, and he's going to be battling with Thielen in that slot. They're going to try to move either of them out at different times, but that's where both of them excel. Mims, I like Mims a lot, but I need to see how that offense is going to go. Will he be able to continue to mature? Ayuk, the downside for Ayuk, I think Ayuk is great, but he's going to an offense much like LaFleur wants to do in Green Bay. His brother, the other LaFleur, with Shanahan there in San Francisco, is perfectly happy throwing the ball 17 times a game and running at 50. And then at 14 and 15, I have Ruggs and Edwards back to back, with Ruggs being ranked just a touch higher because of his explosiveness. I think that I need to see more. I feel like Edwards is going to be the guy to own in this offense for the consistency. But right now, going into their rookie seasons, I'm willing to put Ruggs the 1 spot ahead.
Matt, who are your next 5?
Okay, so at 6, I had T. Higgins. Then I had Mims. I think Mims kind of comes up because of an opportunity, obviously going to the Jets, a great opportunity. I thought they were so lucky that he just kept falling and diving because it looked like they were going to kind of hose themselves out of a receiver. Then I have Ruggs. I think we've all talked about some of our misgivings, but where they drafted him, that offense not having a lot of competition, Gruden likes, those big, fast receivers. The Raiders' tradition is, all I could think when they drafted him was John Madden sitting there saying "speed kills," which was one of his voice drops from the old Madden games. That seemed like a quintessential Raider pick. Then I took Ayuk. I like the offense. I like the talent, but a little bit like Dennis. You never know what you're going to get in that passing game. We saw him last year when they traded for Emmanuel Sanders, and then they had Devo. You figure Kittle pretty well gets his part. They're very focused on the running. Sometimes one or two of those receivers do well. Sometimes you have a guy like Kendrick Bourne just catch all the touchdowns and screw you. So it makes me a little bit nervous. I like his talent, but I don't know that that's the most predictable offensive spot. And then I made a good case for Tyler Johnson. I thought where he got drafted in Tampa Bay, where he's competing against Scotty Miller for the third receiver slot. I liked it. I liked the potential there.
Yeah.
And so I vaulted him up.
All right. So my next couple, I put Colin Johnson and Shenault together. I think it's going to be Colin Johnson that breaks out over Shenault here in Jacksonville. I'm not sure. I wish Shenault would have landed with a more steady head coaching staff and probably a more brighter offensive mind, I guess. I didn't like the landing spot for him. Colin Johnson, I did like it. I don't think they have a real true possession wide receiver on that team. He is a true red zone threat. He was a guy who 2 years ago had a really good season, suffered this year with injuries. And then by the time he got back on the field, Devin Duvernay had just taken off, and they really kind of leaned on him in that Texas offense. So I like Colin Johnson, love the landing spot, think he has a chance to break out. I like Gandy Golden. I think he's got the same. I should have had Edwards above both of them. I don't know why I put him down here. I would truly put Edwards right there. I love Edwards. I think he's got a chance to be a true breakout player. I said, I don't think he breaks out this year. I really don't. I think with that offense, and they still have Tyrell Williams there, I think Edwards is going to be the guy in 2021. Obviously, the last two guys, there's three guys that I want to talk about. Tyler Johnson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Isaiah Hodgins, all who got drafted later in the draft, I think all have true potential and playing time ahead of them. Tyler Johnson, number one, that Matt just mentioned, I think he easily beats out Scotty Miller and I'm trying to remember Justin Watson, who are the only two real threats on there for that third wide receiver set. Writing an article right now for Dynasty Nerds about late-round draft picks. Tyler Johnson is one of my first guys up on there. Tampa Bay ran three wide receiver sets 70% of the time last year, which means they're going to have three wide receivers out there. That was with O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. I know they've got Gronk there, but I'm someone who does not think Gronk's going to be big for the fantasy game. Tyler Johnson, I think, easily slots in opposite of Mike Evans, moving Chris Godwin in the slot where Arians wants him to be, and Johnson now easily gets the weakest matchup every single week. Now, I don't think he's going to be a stud. I think he's going to be a high-end wide receiver 3. But with that offense, we know how much Bruce Arians loves to throw the ball. Tom Brady doesn't turn the ball over. He looks for the matchups. I think Tyler Johnson is a sneaky pick. Same thing with Isaiah Hodgins. I think John Brown, only has 1 year left in his contract. So I think Isaiah Hodgins is a guy in 2021 that could easily be opposite of Stephon Diggs, and I think could end up being better than Stephon Diggs. I obviously, everybody knows I love this kid. I think he's got star in his future. The only problem is going to be Josh Allen there. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones as well. He will be in the article that I'm writing as well. I think that's a great landing spot for him with the Browns. We saw Shea Patterson really kind of torpedoed his stock. I think he can easily come in, be opposite of Odell, move Jarvis into the slot. Cleveland ran three wide receiver sets 50% of the time, or 55% of the time last year. Now, different offensive scheme with Kevin Stefanski. It was about 52%. So I imagine that's kind of where it's going to be. Regardless, he easily, in my opinion, beats out the guys like Damian Ratley, and I don't even remember the other guys now at this point. They suck. They all suck. It's Odell, Jarvis, and nobody. Donovan Peoples-Jones, unless they bring back Higgins, which I don't think they do, easily vaults to the third best wide receiver on that team, and he gives Baker another true weapon there in the wide receiver game. So I think all three of those guys are guys you can get in the third or fourth round that I think all have easy, legit looks at playing time in 2020 and even 2021. Those are really the only guys I want to talk about. I like Duvernay, but we'll see. He's another guy I think you could grab late. Only thing I don't like about Duvernay is he's going to Baltimore with all those other guys, and I don't think Lamar gets him the ball. Because I think that's more of Andrew's role there in the middle of the field. So that's why I've dropped Duvernay so low. So give me the rest of your guys and who you guys want to touch on.
John Brown has 2 more years.
2 more years? Okay, sorry, 2 more years.
But it's only 1.6 to release him after.
That may be why I think in the article I wrote they could get rid of him. But I have to go back and look at it. But I do think, regardless, Isaiah Hodgins, he's a stud. He's a stud. Just trust me on this. He's not Hakeem Butler. But Hakeem Butler's still good.
No, Tyler Johnson is Hakeem Butler.
Ooh, no. Don't put that on Tyler Johnson. He deserves better than that. All right, Dennis, give us the rest of your wide receivers.
So I'm closing out with Devin Duvernay, Lynn Bowden, Laviska Shenault, Van Jefferson, Isaiah Hodgins, Antonio Gandy Golden, Claypool, Tyler Johnson, KJ Hill, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I do like Duvernay's fit, but I think he's going to be you can't really expect a whole lot from him this year. I think that as Baltimore's offense continues to evolve and Jackson becomes a better passer, he's going to run substantially less. Not because he can't run, but because he doesn't need to. That offense, they're loading up on weapons, and they're putting some real talent around. And yes, Andrews works the middle of the field, but he doesn't work it with quickness like Duvernay will. Lynn Bowden, again, I think out there, him and Edwards and Ruggs, they're trying to rebuild that whole core. Bowden, I think they're talking about being the receiving back, replacing DeAndre Washington. Laviska Shenault, I don't know what's going to happen with him. Is he going to continue to mature and become a good wide receiver, or is he going to go down the Cordero Patterson path? Van Jefferson, Isaiah Hodgins. I'm with you on Hodgins. I like him as a prospect. He's big. He's got a good catch radius. For me, I want to the challenge, I think, for him is going to be Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And when they get down low where Hodgins can use his size in the red zone, Allen likes to run. And there is plenty of, somebody with Allen's propensity to turn the ball over is going to look for receivers that make him comfortable, like Cole Beasley or John Brown. And so until they get to a point where he's developed chemistry with Hodgins, I think that it's going to be iffy whether or not they run out of patience. I'm not buying in on Tyler Johnson. I don't see it. I think the NFL has told us everything we need to know about Tyler Johnson.
That's all right. I mean, you're allowed to be wrong about one prospect here, so there we go. We got
eventually. I suppose I will be.
All right, Matt, give us your guys before we move on to the black hole that is tight ends of this class.
So I wrap up with Shenault, Duvernay, Edwards, Gandy Golden. Then I have KJ Hamler. I really liked some of the reports that were coming out. I think he may also have some value as a returner. There's obviously Denver, much like the Raiders, had some holes to fill. They at least had Cortland Sutton, but they really were working on rebuilding all of their weapons. John Elway, in a couple of in his years as GM, has often tried to look at the team that they just can't beat and see what they do, and then try to rebuild something to emulate that. For a while, he was taken with the defenses he saw from New England and the Seahawks, and that's kind of where you saw Denver build that defense that got them the Super Bowl in 2015. They have said over and over this offseason that they're looking at Kansas City and that they feel like to beat Kansas City, you have to be able to score a minimum of 30 points a game, and that's what they're going to go out and try to do. So, as long as Drew Lock is what I hope he is, then that'll help. Then I have Claypool, Bowden, Van Jefferson, KJ Hill. I really liked that pick late for the Chargers. I think there's another guy who kind of comes in late and has a sneaky chance to get up there, be a third wide receiver, and be a weapon. So I have him, and then my last was Hodgins.
All right. Let's finish it out with the tight ends here, which, I mean, I just kind of ranked the guys here. I'm not – Troutman and Parkinson are actually probably the most interesting to me. Parkinson just because of his landing spot. Same with Troutman, obviously going to New Orleans. We hoped Jared Cook going there a year ago now that he was going to be a stud. Really didn't do anything. I think he's got one more year left on his contract. I would not be surprised if Troutman ends up taking over there. I know a lot of people are big on Asai. Asiasi, I don't know. Went to New England. I think the reason everybody's high on him is because he went to New England. I don't know if that means anything for fantasy. Obviously, I like the Harrison Bryant pick by the Browns. I don't know what that means for fantasy. I still think it's Hooper. I think Bryant actually kind of slots in as a better tight end than Njoku, so he's probably there too. But I don't know how often they're going to use they're going to use two tight end sets, but I don't know how much both of them will be viable for fantasy. So he's kind of a fade for me. I obviously loved King Albert going to Denver, but with Fant there, I think that kind of kills his value as well. And then Komet going to Chicago. If Nick Foles is starting quarterback, I love it. If it's Mitch Trubisky, Komet's probably not going to do anything. So that's kind of the way that my rankings fall. I'm not sold on any of them. If you need to draft, if you're in anything – if you're in a 4-round or less rookie draft, I'd avoid all these guys. If you're in like the 16-teamer me and Dennis are in that's like 6 rounds, grab some. They might turn out for you. Outside of that, I'm avoiding these guys at all costs. Dennis, what are your tight end ranks?
Well, I started mine with Troutman. I love the landing spot. He seems to have shown that he's an all-around tight end, good route runner, good pass catcher. He's definitely stepping up from a small school. At 2, I went with Alberta Okwuegbunam, I think is how John told us to pronounce it.
Yeah, I just King Albert.
King Albert.
Yeah, King
so
Albert for me.
It's about fantasy points. He's not going to be on the field to block. Unfortunately, he's going to be behind Noah Fant, but once he moves up the depth chart and gets out there, he's going to be out there to catch the ball. I do have Asiasi at 3. He went 44 for 641 last year with 4 touchdowns at UCLA.
Okay.
So he's a big guy. He's like we're talking big guy. He's like 6'3", 280. But everything you read, he's lauded for how smooth he is as a route runner. So he's got decent speed. I feel like he's probably not 280. He probably is. If he is, man, maybe that's that Samoan diet, I guess, or something. So we'll see what happens with Asiasi. Then I have Cole Kmet and Harrison Bryant as well. I think with the Browns picking up Njoku's 5th-year option today and bringing in Hooper, there's plenty of time for Bryant. I'm not probably drafting him unless it's a very, very deep draft and it's the last round and I'm just looking to throw somebody on a taxi squad for a couple years. Bryant is good. He's been comp to Kittle.
Yeah.
So there's some talent there. I think talent wins out eventually. So it could really provide Cleveland with a very, very deep tight end room.
What about you, Matt?
I mean, see, it's interesting you mentioned the deep tight end room. I think that was the problem
for Denver.
I think that was the problem with a few of these tight ends. It's like, oh, they're kind of interesting. And then you're like, oh, and they are now one of 87 people. So,
right.
I had Troutman up the top. I think that was universally not only it's a good offense, it was a good place where they took him. Jared Cook is what's in front of him, who you figure would be there a year, maybe 2. He's 33. That seemed like the most clear path in addition to being a great spot. I have Alberto number 2. He played with Drew Lock in college. Drew Lock, if you follow him on Twitter because your Denver is inscribed on your heart, as I do, then you saw that he was incredibly thrilled that pick was made. My reservation there is he is now the 9th tight end on the roster, no joke, for Denver. They have Fant. They also signed Nick Vannett to a free agent contract, re-signed Jeff Hireman. They have Jake Butt. They have Albert O. They have guys that I'm.
Do you still have Fumagalli?
Yeah, we still have Troy Fumagalli. They have not let go of anyone. They still have Andrew Beck, who they traded from the Patriots. So that's a little bit of a concern, but I think they're thinking of him as a speed weapon. I still liked the idea. Hopkins, I like the receiving options. Obviously, we saw what they've done with Higbee and Everett there. You figure Everett's going to move on, so maybe an opening there. Komet, just Chicago, hard to know what you're going to get in Chicago. Another place, I think he's now the 8th tight end on their roster. We aren't sure how good any of them are, including our friend Jimmy Graham, who's had a precipitous fall, but they all exist. And then I had Bryant. I liked him as a prospect too, but we just talked about, obviously they signed Hooper to the largest contract in tight end history, and then they just picked up the option on Njoku, which tells you they're not ready to let him go. And I feel like they have somebody else.
They have two other. They have Pharaoh Brown and Steven Carlson as well. Yes.
No, those aren't. Didn't they have Ricky Seals-Jones? Is he gone?
Yeah, they let him go. He's not there. I mean,
he's in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that Bryant's going to be the number 2. As much as I love Njoku, Bryant's the better overall prospect. What I said about on the Browns podcast I did yesterday about Njoku is definitely the best looking and best physical freak of those 3 tight ends, but he can't catch and he can't block. So that kind of hurts his value just a little bit. Both Bryant and Hooper can do both.
I am surprised that we didn't mention who has got to be our true tight end one, which is Thad Moss of the Redskins.
He just went in the 2nd round, right, Dennis, of the listener league?
Oh, my God.
Well, honestly, it's got to be because of the landing spot, right? Because they have the well of sadness. It's the reason that, I was hot about Antonio Gibson. They need somebody to catch the ball. If you looked at this draft and a lot of the young quarterbacks who are kind of in a spot where they need to solidify their position, the Giants didn't get a bunch of weapons, but they at least built a better line and a better defense to help Daniel Jones. The Broncos got a bunch of weapons for Drew Lock. Bills have been trying to get weapons for Josh Allen. And just a lot of middle fingers pointed at Dennis Haskins based on what I'm seeing from that draft.
Dwayne Haskins. I don't know if that was
subliminal there. I think Matt just flipped me off. He just flipped me off subliminally there.
You said Dennis Haskins.
Yeah, who actually I think was Mr. Belding on the on Saved by the Bell. Did you know they're bringing back Saved by the Bell?
I did. I saw the trailer for it. Slater and Jesse. Yeah, so it looks just wonderful.
If you wait long enough, everything comes back to you.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Obviously, I appreciate both you guys jumping on. I think now that the draft is over, we can kind of jump into – it was just me and Dennis who did this last year, but now that we've got Matt with us, probably breaking down the division, seeing where we think these teams go, how we think these rosters might shake out. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I hope everybody enjoys their rookie drafts. I'm sure everybody's kind of kicked off Monday with everything going on in the world. So good luck with everything. Rate, review, subscribe. Thank you for those of us who are jumping on the video. Sorry I couldn't get to all of the comments on there, but definitely come back when we come back on again live, and we will definitely jump in and talk about your guys' questions. Well, we'll see both you guys later. Have yourselves a great day, and thank you everybody again for watching.
Have a good one.
Oops.